Welcome to the Space Jam.
Nearly 25 years after the original Space Jam, Warner Bros. Have finally decided to splash out and give us what we've always wanted. An elaborate HBO Max commercial. Come on and slam, and welcome to the Jam. Or should I say, welcome back. Honestly, of all the films stuck in development hell, I didn't think a Space Jam sequel would be the one to surface, and yet, here we are. And if we're honest, the fact that the first film wasn't an embarrassing disaster is probably nothing short of a miracle. So you would think that going back and making a sequel would be a risky venture, probably doomed to fail, right? Well, look, I know Space Jam gets your nostalgic heart pumping, and the soundtrack is a banger, and Lola Bunny is a sex symbol, and the Toon Squad is iconic. Take those rose-coloured glasses off. Space Jam sucks.
Heresy!
Okay, that might be harsh, but the reality is it's a totally disposable kids film that's forgettable, aside from how weird the concept at its core is, the fact that it's absolute peak 90s, and a big part of your childhood if you grew up around the same time as me. But as a movie... Sorry, I don't know why I just became a cast member of The Sopranos.
I don't know. Fucking slanderous me.
I'm not saying the original didn't have its moments, but I really do feel like it's been elevated to a position it's undeserving of over the last few years. I mean, at best, both of these movies are passable kids' films, and I tried to go into the sequel with that mindset. This is a movie for kids, not cynical adults like me. But the problem is, the movie wants to play it both ways. Here they're trying to tap into the nostalgia of the original, but never do quite enough to engage with the people who would have that nostalgia. It's mostly played as a kids' film, and as such it doesn't connect with that older audience as much as it seems to want to. The reason I say they want to is that there's references here that won't play to kids at all. References to things like Chappelle's Show, The Matrix, or Austin Powers, to name a few. And honestly, they're not funny independent of the context, and they're also not funny when you know the context. You'll just recognise what they're referring to. And technically, I guess it's rather neat, but really, it's about as funny as when they take an Oscar host and put them into those movies at the start of the ceremony, you know? That's side-splitting hilarity. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. No offence. The Warner Brothers IPs. I mean, commercialism is always what has driven Space Jam. The first film was inspired by a series of ads for Air Jordan.
This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
That's all, folks.
Well, that's my line.
And it's not like the first film was ever subtle about its commercialism.
Come on, Michael, it's game time. Get your Hanes on, lace up your Nikes, grab your Wheaties and your Gatorade, and we'll pick up a Big Mac on the way to the ballpark.
Here, though, it feels even more desperate. I mean, the first film at least mostly focused on Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes, but this time it's all about Warner Brothers properties and the brand. So much so that it can't help but feel like an overlong commercial. The biggest offence of it all, though, is that they rarely use these characters in a creative or interesting way. I can't believe I'm going to praise Ready Player One, but it felt like they at least had a reverence for certain characters and knew how to implement them to give us some interesting and cool moments that felt true to the character. But here, most of the Warner Brothers library is used as set dressing, with some of the characters honestly looking like they were on the way to a Halloween party and grabbed the last costume on the rack. If you were hoping to see some moments of legendary characters interact for the first time, don't. Because you won't get that here. On a technical level, the film is definitely better. There's a surprising amount of traditional 2D animation in this, at least far more than I expected, and it looks pretty decent. I would even say it felt like classic Looney Tunes in a way that arguably the original never really did. But what's strange though is that it never goes back to the style that the original film had, with live action mixed with that style of animation. Instead, Lebron is mixing it up with CGI tunes. The CGI looks fine for the most part. It's implemented in the basketball game at the end of the film. Sometimes the textures on the tunes looks a little bit weird. Maybe that's just the jump from 2D to 3D animation, perhaps. It definitely looks expensive, but it's relatively visually interesting, although it does feel a little bit hollow and a little bit lifeless. The story, as you might expect, is pretty basic, but I actually do think it's a bit more ambitious than the original. Of course, like every film now, it's about family. LeBron is failing to connect with his son, who is more interested in video games than basketball. And our villain managed to exploit that to turn LeBron's son against him. Our villain is a Warner Bros. Algorithm that wants to sign LeBron to a deal at the studio. Meanwhile, the Looney Tunes have gone their separate ways and Bugs hopes to reform them to make a basketball team. You know, that classic story. If the story sounds a bit scattered, it is. And you might expect that from a Looney Tunes film, but it really feels like there's kind of two distinct plots at play here. The LeBron father-son story and the Looney Tunes breaking up. And they don't really mesh all that well together overall. But I guess the story is adequate. 6, by the way. 6 screenwriters. That's what it took to come up with this script. Way to go, Hollywood. Our lead, of course, is LeBron James, and he's, well, he's, you know when SNL has athletes hosts, right? And then you can actually see how good the actors are at actually acting. Solid writing, Tom. I had that feeling throughout all of this. And look, he gave it a decent go. I don't think he's terrible. It felt like he was at least game to make fun of himself every now and then and come off like a bit of a dick. But yeah, it does feel at times like the film is just there to stroke his ego anyway.
LeBron James. He's a family man, an entrepreneur, a social media superstar with millions of fans worldwide. He's more than an athlete. He's a king.
The only other actor I kind of want to talk about is Don Cheadle, who plays our villain Algae Rhythm, who is a sentient Warner Bros. Algorithm who generates film ideas for them. That would explain a lot. I was just continually baffled he was in this. I just kept looking at him like, you were in Hotel Rwanda, man. I think he's woefully miscast here. Like, I do think this character could have worked on paper with a more charismatic, energetic actor. And Don Cheadle is a great actor. I just do not think he was the right person for the part here. The tunes all sound fine. I mean, they didn't really go for any stunt casting aside from Zendaya as internet favourite Lola Bunny. I thought she was okay. Yeah, that's all I have to say about Lola Bunny, actually. This character is what caused all this outrage, huh? Well, I do think it's a better film as far as the pacing goes compared to the original film. It does still feel too long. I mean, the film is under 2 hours, but felt longer than that to me. More time is dedicated to the game, which you could definitely argue was an oversight of the first film. And I was generally entertained, but I don't think I got many laughs out of it. Maybe I did laugh once. And I'm sure I got more laughs than that out of the first film. Yet, despite all this, I don't think it was a terrible film. It's a watchable one. It just has fleeting moments where it feels like it could have been something more. But it doesn't aspire to be anything more than just a commercial for Warner Bros. Library or HBO Max. Which now, for just $10 a month through its ad-supported tier, you can get access to such classic shows from the likes of HBO, Adult Swim, and many more. And that's to say nothing about their insane film library and day-and-date releases with some of the hottest upcoming releases from Warner Bros. Pictures, including Space Jam: A New Legacy and The Suicide Squad. I did deserve that, to be fair. Unfortunately, as much as it tries to be a trip down memory lane, it never really proves itself worthy. While it might be technically impressive and it's surely competent, it also feels incredibly uninspired and lazy, feeling like it's trying to capitalise on the nostalgia of the original film while also serving as an advertisement for Warner Bros. Properties. While kids will no doubt get a kick out of the cartoon antics, there's plenty of stuff that's going to go over their head, and not because it's clever or intended for adults, but because it's a very scattershot in its approach and really feels outdated. And while the original film certainly is a monument to 90s cultural nostalgia, this film would probably be a monument to corporate synergy and a reminder that sometimes nostalgia is best left in the past where it belongs. Look, you knew I was coming back. You knew the video could only end one way. That's all, folks.